I am the Famous American, and welcome to a sequel of a recent video I made called I'm 53% Hispanic. I should have applied for a minority scholarship back in 1999. So, like most of my videos, this is based on your interest in the topic. Let's face it, it's the free market. If this wasn't interesting, you wouldn't be watching it, and it wouldn't spawn other videos. That's how this whole thing works. So thank you for being part of the free market. So, I'm 53% Hispanic. Should I have, tried to get a scholarship? And a few of the comments that have come in basically said this: if you have to ask, then you already know the answer. And that brings us to one of the major reoccurring themes of this channel, this whole one-drop rule situation. We know that the one-drop rule is bad when we look back on American history, looking at it from an African-American perspective. But then we can easily reverse that and to find out, well, what does it take exactly to be a Black American, African American specifically? Well, do you need to be able to trace it back and prove it through family trees? Or what if you are actually of African descent, but you never had family here? It gets dicey. It's hard to know. But for this video, we're going to basically decide, well, how Hispanic do you have to be considered Hispanic? And by simply asking the question, we're getting ourselves into that one-drop rule situation again, aren't we? I don't think there's a clear-cut answer on this. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation, and people wouldn't click on this video and leave comments and be interested in it. So let's just put it in perspective, okay? Based on DNA test results, I say that I'm 53% Hispanic. That includes Native American via Mexico. That also includes Sephardic Jewish / Spanish as well. And my dad has a little bit of Spanish as well. So when you do the math, that's 53% Hispanic, but that's from an American perspective, where we deem Hispanic as a race and minority or minority. No one can give you a straight answer because no one really knows. So it gets interesting. I don't speak Spanish. My mother never spoke Spanish. My grandma barely spoke Spanish, but she was not allowed to speak Spanish as a kid, even though her parents only spoke Spanish. So there becomes this thing where if you're legitimately Hispanic, then that means you speak Spanish. Well, we can't say that for me. But we can say that from a DNA test perspective, the slight majority of my DNA would count as what we deem as Hispanic. Now imagine this. What if someone had less Hispanic DNA than I did, but they still had Hispanic culture more so than me, and they spoke Spanish? Well, they would be perceived as more Hispanic than me. But see, it's all a little bit imaginary. It's all a little bit arbitrary. It's a social construct. And I know this. I openly have talked about this from the very beginning. I get it that race is a social construct, which I guess now I need to make another video pointing out that, quote, Hispanic is not a race. But ultimately, it's a social construct. So the moment we start giving scholarships away to minorities, then we have to think, well, who counts as a minority? If you have 53% of a certain race, does that make you a minority? Your comments right here.